This video is part 2 in a series talking about each mode, how I approach them when writing, and composing an example in each of them, as well as describing one or two other compositional techniques I used in these pieces. Links to the other videos in the series will be in the description, pinned in the comments, and in the card in the top right of this video. Now let's get on with it. The Songwriter's Guide for Writing in a Mode, Part 2. Dorian, Pedals and Picking Patterns. Due to Dorian's association with folk music, I decided to go for a finger-picked acoustic style piece with some U-bass, strings, and 8-string ukulele, which has a sort of luty, mandolin-y sound. A good way to highlight the unique sound of Dorian in your music is to make use of the sixth in your melodies, as well as including the minor second chord in your progressions. A technique used heavily in this style, as well as in pop and classical music, is the pedal. A pedal is a repeating note that keeps on being played throughout a section or piece. While these are often bass notes, they are also found higher in pitch, usually being played by a string section, referred to as an inverse pedal. Or in the middle of the range as part of a repeating ostinato or picking pattern. Often the pedal will start fairly consonant or resolved, being the root or fifth of the starting chord. Then, as the chord sequence progresses, the pedal will start to clash with the new chords introduced, building until the sequence repeats and the pedal goes back to being at rest. In this example, I've decided to make one of the notes in the picking pattern act as a pedal to help build this consonance and dissonance. This last suggestion for Dorian isn't exactly a technique, but is a recommendation for when trying to introduce fingerpicking or any other musical idea into your songs. Don't be afraid to borrow patterns from existing songs. Learn a few songs and their patterns and try out different chords and shapes with them. For example, the picking pattern I've used with this piece was inspired by Blackbird by the Beatles, which in turn was inspired by Donovan. With that considered, let's see how it turns out. Phrygian and Vamps. The third mode is Phrygian and is best represented for its heavy use of its signature flattened second note, a semitone above the root, as well as by utilising the major chord on the second and the minor chord on the seventh of your chord progressions. Another way to use Phrygian is to use it in conjunction with the Phrygian dominant and double harmonic scales, associated with flamenco music, something that I've gone into more detail about in a previous video. Due to this video being on the modes themselves, I've decided to stay in the standard Phrygian scale, going for an acoustic rock sound with an acoustic guitar, bass, drums and lead guitar. A technique I decided to make heavy use of in this example was the vamp. A vamp is a short repeating musical section usually built around a repetitive loop of one or two chords. Similar in concept to riffs, but focus on chords and harmony rather than melodies. These can either make up the entirety of the song altogether, like in Dreams by Fleetwood Mac, compose whole sections like in tracks like Take 5 by Dave Brubeck, or can be used as intros before the whole band comes in, as they are often used in musicals like West Side Story. Vamps are incredibly effective tools, allowing you to outline the harmony with just 2 chords, alongside helping to create a more hypnotic or groove-based feeling to a piece. With this piece, I've decided to vamp between the root and the 7th, creating a more subtle Phrygian sound. This is what I've ended up with. Lydian and Implying chords. One of Lydian's key traits is the presence of an augmented fourth. This, alongside the presence of a major chord on the root and 2nd, adds to this mode's dreamlike sound, with pieces using it emphasising both of these elements. In the first video on modes, I used Lydian in my example and went for a more disco sound, so to avoid repeating myself I decided to write a faster paced indie rock example using electric guitars, drums and bass. The technique I've decided to focus on with this mode is what I call implying chords. What I mean by this is writing the main melody or riff of a piece in such a way that you don't need to be able to hear the chords or bass line to know what the chords underneath it would be. This is best achieved simply by making the main notes of your melody notes from the chord that would be underneath it. This doesn't mean all of the notes of your melody have to be notes from the chords. Passing notes are important and stop your part from being just an arpeggio of the chord. But if using this technique, the notes of the chords will probably be your focus. When doing this, you can also experiment with changing the root note underneath and seeing if this makes your riff outline a different chord. This could be useful for other sections of your song or just to keep interest in your piece. Let's hear it in action. Thanks for giving this video a watch. Links to the other videos in the series will be in the description, pinned in the comments, and in a card in the top right of the video. If you have any comments on this video or suggestions for future videos, let me know and I'll be sure to consider them.